Okay, say some things.
Hello. Adventure.
Love.
Connection.
Risk. Passion.
Evolution.
Play.
Life, the Archetypal Tarot Podcast. Provocative mythology for the 21st century.
Aloha. NASA discovered a new comet. They named it NeoWise. And this was back in late March of this year. And for the past couple of weeks here in July, it's been passing by the Earth, and some of us can see it. In this episode, we discuss what this celestial event can reflect for us here on Earth in the midst of the chaos of multiple pandemics. What can it teach us about developing a new wisdom that's equal to these challenges? So please join me, Julienne Javot, an archetypal consultant, and my co-host, Story Through Stone founder and teacher, Cyndera Quackenbush, for another lively discussion. Hey, Cyndera.
Hello, Julienne. How are you?
I'm coping. How about yourself?
Oh, same. I'm in there with you, but in different ways, like we all are, I guess. But we are having a very special episode today because we have a fine announcement, which is that, drumroll.
It's the best I can do. Maybe I'll add one in post. Okay. What is the announcement? Cyndera, remind me.
We have 100,000 downloads.
Woohoo! Yay us. 100,000 downloads. I don't even know what that looks like. It's such a large number. It's kind of abstract, but that's awesome. Wow. That's a number of people who are crazy enough to download and I would imagine listen to eventually our podcast. So that's pretty awesome. It's humbling. It's actually really humbling. And now I'm a little bit nervous.
Well, we and 100,000 of you out there are so happy you're with us still. And we are going to explore another aberration today, which is the Comet NeoWise. And Julienne and I are going to explore a little bit about, if we take that word NeoWise and we think about it in these times, what does it mean for us and how can we pass by Earth with a new reflection, just as that amazing comet is passing by us. It's already been the closest to Earth that it's going to be for 6,800 years. But I believe you can still see it in the night sky. If you can find a nice, dark, starry night, maybe out in the desert where I'm from, used to be, you can see it. So
maybe our listeners in Hawaii, although they've got a hurricane coming. Probably.
Oh my goodness.
Never mind. I know, really. What else? The world is in chaos. And comets have always been seen as since the ancient days, it's highly symbolic. They're always big events preceded by comets. I think we're in a big event, but an idea of a comet has always been held. I mean, there's images which we can construe as comets in ancient cave paintings. So a big deal, and I'm just going to couch this in understanding this conversation about this comet NeoWise. Something that I kind of think about a lot, or rather it's like an underlying sense of like, holy crap, what's going on? And guess what? It is really big. And for 7, almost 8 years, I think next month will be our 8-year anniversary of this podcast, that we've been talking about the hero's journey through the tarot. We've been looking at things symbolically. And I think for me at times, and I would imagine for many other people, it can feel a little bit abstract going through the really, really difficult times when you talk about it in this sort of system of symbols and narratives and stories, that it can be abstract and that there's a sense of being trained for something really, challenging and life-changing. And guess what? We're in it. That's right. Kind of where I am. It's like, this is what we've been trained for. And I think a little bit that, to me anyway, sometimes feels like it gets lost because it is so difficult. that, yeah, this is what we've been training for, people. Our souls are present on this planet right now, and we've been in training, and here we are. It's happening. So, intimidating, sure, all of those things. Everything doesn't get all done at once. It's not just simply on us, but things like this symbol of a comet are, to me anyway, is like, oh, okay, big reminder. This is the real thing. We're in the real stuff.
Absolutely. And in case you're curious how this is all tied to the tarot today for our officially archetypal tarot podcast, we'll be connecting this in with the star, the archetypes therein. So I would love to just kind of talk about how this came to be, the inspiration for this podcast and the article I just wrote recently for this.
We'll link, if people want to read the whole thing, it'll be linked in the notes. So if you're in a podcast app, just scroll down, you'll see a link to read the whole thing.
Yeah, that'll be great. I've been entering into a process during this quarantine summer of deepening in with my own self-created deck, the Story Through Stone deck. And one morning I woke up, I've been drawing a card a day, like you do when you're either learning a new deck or writing your own. You draw a card a day and see where you're at with it that day and what comes up. And I woke up one morning and I read about the Comet NeoWise. It was just kind of on my phone on the news stream. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. NeoWise. What a cool name for a comet. And then I came out to my altar and I did my usual meditation and shuffled the cards. And I picked out the card for the day. And it was, lo and behold, a card with a billion-year-old stone image in it called, that my father had found, called Meteor in the Desert. So that's the image of, technically the meteor is actually one that comes into the atmosphere of Earth. Comets just glide by, but here was, a flying space phenomenon happening in this card just moments after, reading about NeoWise. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's here. I got to reflect on this. And it led to a day of exploration of looking into both the science of comets, which I found fascinating, and the history of, how humans have perceived comets and what they've been tied to, the predictions, all sorts of things, and led me to a moment of reflection of, what does it mean to see one in these times, and where we are at with that? What is the sign here?
Yeah, well, your article was fantastic. I got a lot out of it, and I think what you bring up about, we're kind of Jungian nerds ourselves. That you mentioned that Carl Jung, psychoanalyst, believed that comets represented opposing, unintegrated beliefs that are revolutionary in nature and ran counter to collective values. And see, okay, so that chunk in and of itself is ginormous. And God, there's so many layers to that. But one thing I wanted to bring up is there's a lot of, my astrology friends have also been pointing towards, our epoch that we're in is similar to the era of slavery, the beginning of the Civil War. Yeah. So similar, placements and things happening in the viewed through the astrological realm. But the fact that unintegrated beliefs, and how I still, as much opposition we have in the United States, I still think then more the goodness in us is still being brought out. I think it can be hard to see. And when we talked about the meditations on beauty and how to look for moral beauty, I think that's what's kind of saving my bacon, because I truly, truly believe that the larger amount of us have moved who know compassion and do care for each other. It can be hard when you watch the news and you see the kind of extremes of things, and that's where I feel like I lose the hope the most when I stop looking for the moral beauty and seeing the truth that more of us are attuned to each other and realize we're connected. in some way, shape, or form or not. So that's something I just thought was really interesting. The comet is a symbol of unintegrated beliefs, and maybe more of us are in a place of compassion, but we're being pushed into relationships more, to realize that we're in relationship with our supposed enemy, or those that are diametrically opposed to where our world views are. We're still in relationship with it. So to me, that's kind of the fulcrum point, is to remember that even if you don't like someone, even if you want to cancel them, you can't get rid of that relationship. That relationship still exists as much as you want to get rid of it.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned hope a little while back, because that is one of the great qualities of the Star Tarot card. It's, as if we remember the trajectory of the cards, the star happens after a really, really difficult card, right? And it's bringing back hope and reflection and connection with oneself after this dramatic event. We're far from being out of the woods with the more difficult cards, I think. I've written another article recently about the death card again. It's just up and up and up. Let's take a look at some of the scientific facts about comets that I think are really amazing jumping off points for reflecting metaphorically.
Let's do that.
So comets, this was something I didn't know, but it's very likely, a lot of these facts, by the way, are from NASA websites, so are thought to have brought life to Earth itself ages and ages ago in the form of early amino acids. So the idea that, that something traveling through space that had unique elements crash lands here and develops life is super interesting. And we also think of crashed meteors and the end of the dinosaur ages, so that there's the capacity for this great destruction, but also of life that comes with these aberrations of the stars. They may also have started the Earth's first oceans. So if you think of that incredible symbol we have of the unconscious, of the depths within ourselves, those starting from the comet that was passing by ages ago.
Hold on,
I kind of always, I had a very innocent, childlike view of this before I researched, which was, comets are just kind of like these balls flying through space. And, but with the research, I realized that they're actually orbiting the sun, just like all of us are. And the closer to the sun they are, the faster they go. The further from the sun, the slower they're going. This is all very rich going in my mind metaphorically, which we'll get into in a moment. Can't wait to break it down here with you. Okay, so this was one of the most amazing things I learned about comets. Okay. Well, first of all, you got to know they have a nucleus, so they have a core, they have a center, but they also, so every time they kind of go close to the sun, that there's this danger that they can break up or even disappear. But some recent findings have found that when they break up or fall apart, that these parts can still remain in orbit and then come back together, actually reform back into themselves. So there's sort of this destruction and rebirth cycle that happens within comets themselves. How cool. And then some of these little parts that fall off, those can become meteors that we see trailing through the atmosphere, making beautiful shooting stars, and sometimes on very rare occasions, little meteorites that actually land here. So what does this all mean, Julianne? And I've written my thoughts in the article, but I think the whole point of doing a podcast is that we can explore together these metaphors, these, jumping off what we know from science these days, which has many gifts to us, and playing with these ideas in the psychological, metaphorical and spiritual lens. So first of all, we've got the comets. They've brought life to Earth. They've brought the oceans. Anything come to mind for you, Julianne?
Well, what immediately came to mind to me, and it wasn't necessarily what I was going to, are in my notes, but do I ever follow a script? No. Um, Scripts are for wussies. Uh, the Many of the indigenous folks, the original peoples, and I will say that in terms of, the ancient stories that we can find of, I've been doing a lot of genealogy and kind of going through my roots. So pre-Christian Celtic lands, so Scotland, Ireland, etc. A lot of Native American and pre-contact South America. There's so many stories about how we've come from the stars, and
Yeah.
that some even know specifically what star system they're from. The Pleiades, my friends of mine in Hawaii, their original peoples are believed, they look at the different peoples who've come to the planet, came through the planet, are from specific systems. So that idea of we are made of stars, we are connected to even these things that are just little glimpses out in the world. And Comet makes it, the fact that it was named NeoWise, new wisdom. I think wisdom is something that can be in short supply, and we have what I would consider an amusing version of something that tends to kill wisdom and kill the development of wisdom, and that's social media. More and more, I'm kind of seeing like it can be a tool used for good, but it frequently is not. People are just, not listening, not developing wisdom necessarily. I'm not saying it's barren of that. I'm just saying it as it's a creation that most people don't know how to use with wisdom, and it's not created and oriented in such a way, because the speed at which we can, just respond to something or, react to it. And that's, I guess, to me, the wisdom is, are you reacting to something, or are you responding to something that is, triggering you or whatever? There's just so much going on that, like, how I don't personally think social media on a large scale is good for us. I think it can be, but again, it's like you need the wisdom. You need to develop the wisdom in order to use the tool, and the tool is not helping us. It's moving us away from wisdom. It moves us to react versus respond, and that to me is the kind of the wisdom place. So, what's the new wisdom? I myself am tending to just stay off of social media as much as possible. I mean, some is required for my job, but that's kind of where I feel with it. And I also think, in terms of communication, we should probably stop for our sponsored break. What do you think?
That's right. We'll have more comments and metaphors for you in just a moment.
So, hey, let's just take a quick moment here to say thanks to our sponsor. Keen is the world's largest online network of spiritual advisors, providing quality love and relationship advice, psychic advice, and tarot readings since 1999. And I remember hearing about them back in the Bay Area in 1999. And when they contacted us, I was like, awesome. I mean, that's for our website to remain for, that long, over 10 years that's pretty impressive. You and I have both gotten readings through them, and, it's a place to get advice on all kinds of things, career, love, guidance in these uncertain times. And so Keen's trusted advisors are there to help, and 24/7 you can call or chat, and every conversation is backed by a satisfaction guarantee. So if it totally went sideways and was not up to par, they'll, basically give you a credit so you can give it another shot. And it's anonymous, which I think is cool. I think, like you said, when you had your reading, it was like, it's a new emotional experience to call a stranger and ask for advice, right?
Yeah.
So, and you can do it anonymously. Your account is just basically like Keen member number. So that's kind of cool. You can feel good about it. And the fees are they start at $1.99 a minute. And for our listeners, go to trykeen.com/archetypal and you will get your first 5-minute reading for $5. So that's pretty cool. trykeen.com/archetypal. And it's in the beginning of our show notes.
Coming back from break, as you're speaking about, responses and, how you're communicating through social media, and all the stuff about stars and being from the stars, made of the stars, I'm reminded of that old Serbian proverb that says, "Be humble, for you are made of the earth, but be proud because you're also made of the dust of stars." And I think that is one of maybe the gifts of being NeoWise is holding the tension of the opposites of opposing realities of binary thinking, of standing in the middle and holding both and dreaming up the third, dreaming up. We've got our Earth, we have the stars that we have counted on. We know our North Star, but can we remember that North Star, be guided by it, and know that there is here's this comet that interrupts the safety of our preconceived notions, right? And it enters into our consciousness, and then we have to rethink our universe and say, wow, there's other entities going on. And so I think it's an important time for thinking about all the ways in which we have embraced or mostly excluded the other in our society in so many ways, shapes, and forms, whether that be race, religion, practicing the tarot. We're a bit of another, if you will, and seeing these presences as actually life-giving and vital to our planet, and welcoming them into the consciousness, just like we're watching the comet NeoWise pass by in the stars. And you had mentioned the Aboriginal belief systems and coming from the stars, and asking who are the original stewards of the land that we're standing on now, and how are they alive still? So we've created others in our mindset, but they were actually here first. How did they nurture and grow the life on this land, and that is now sorely being taken granted for? But I would say that this NeoWise consciousness is waking us up again to, wow, actually, where I live, and, I'm not able to travel across the globe right now, but where I live right now is incredibly beautiful, and I can go out for a walk and really enjoy it and appreciate it. And so we are returning to a recognition and respect of this original land and original life here.
Yes, and I'm hearing more and more people taking the time to do the research of the land that they live on now and finding out who those original peoples were. Are there still, organized tribes? Are there, who were the people who occupied the land before, the colonial, epoch started here? That's it can be tricky. I'm trying to research it here in Maryland.
Yeah.
And, it's funny to make a phone call. I mean, everything's kind of like COVID, which is, that's our pandemic, but it's an interesting time to research, or at least try to understand, who were the original caretakers of the land that we're on. And I personally find that very enriching and difficult and ouchy, but I think part of gaining wisdom is being able to be uncomfortable. And a lot of conversations around race, it's just like, really have to be willing and attenuate yourself to being uncomfortable. And I think that's just speaking as somebody who's a white folk, that the wisdom gained from being uncomfortable is it can only be gained by being uncomfortable. And
Right.
and it's just a reminder of just how comfortable and how easy it is to project that on everybody else's experience. And that's, we've kind of turn this around to a bunch of different things, but the development of new wisdom in this time, the tests that we're being all asked to undergo together. There's no single answer, but I think the development of wisdom doesn't happen overnight, but the consciousness of doing it and remembering that, we're all at some point indigenous people. Everybody, the people who were thousands of years ago, all probably worshipped a goddess, most likely, or they, the moon and the sun and things like that. So those are the roots of everybody. And it kind of makes me think that in a future podcast next month, or the one after that, it'd be nice to delve into a specific version of what is called the principles of aloha. And there's many different versions of these, but one that a friend of mine is working with could be really, really helpful in making this idea that can be abstract of NeoWise, new wisdom upon us, but it's a great starting place. And I'll just mention one, the H. They describe A-L-O-H-A, aloha. The one that comes to me the strongest is H stands for ha'a, ha'a, ha'a. And that's humility. And the specific kind of humility is the courage to be in the appropriate position and understanding your place. So in conversation with how we're being uncomfortable, it takes courage to put yourself in the appropriate position. And that appropriate position that I'm kind of thinking of in terms of really looking at where I sit in the world and be humble enough to listen and the courage to be uncomfortable. That's so right. Yeah, it's not something that generic American culture really has. There's no place for that, and certainly it's not being lauded by our political leaders, or several of them anyway. But I want to dive into that a little bit more. There's a lot.
It sounds like the 101,000 download ready happening in the future here. Sounds good. And for me, as a white person, reading White Fragility has been a landmark text for really leaning into discomfort and really opening my eyes in so many ways. And that's just like what I think the Comet metaphor can do for us, right? Imagine being ancient, not having all the scientific facts to put you at comfort right now, but to see something that's just flying seemingly closer and closer to your planet, it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, right? And so looking at truths, looking at things that you didn't want to look at before, these are really, really important ways to steep into the new wisdom. But it can bring up a lot of emotion, right? We've talked a little bit before on this podcast about avoiding overwhelm and things like that. That doesn't do anyone any good. The comets brought perhaps the original oceans here. So a big question for this time is, how do we embrace the overwhelming emotion that is arising in this collective moment? How can we ride the waves and build resilience and sea legs for difficult conversations? So I think knowing the difference between uncomfortable and safe is really important. We're going to have a lot of conversations that are uncomfortable. But we're more than almost always safe in those conversations. But we don't always realize that. So knowing the difference between those two things and entering with new courage into those conversations is, I think, another thing the NeoWise is bringing about.
Agreed. And the approach, cannot be, it has to be in harmony. The masculine and feminine archetypes have to be in harmony. You can't have it purely about agency, like, the arrow. You can't just shoot an arrow, and you can't, it's not just purely feminine. It's not simply about the circle. It's going to have to be both, and it's going to have to be developing the wisdom along with both. And the feminine, to me, the strongest part of the feminine is just, we are connected to each other, and a big part of the projecting our own mindset onto other people, is the more masculine part of it, because it slows you down if you don't project. You can't move forward if you're constantly taking moments to connect. You know what I mean? Like there's going to have to be a reharmonization, or approach it as a harmony versus, or maybe a balance for a little while, but then into harmony. That it's not going to be solved overnight. There aren't any absolutes. The patience and again the humility to the courage to be in the appropriate position. Maybe you don't know. just need that. Maybe you don't know.
That's
Maybe
right.
You don't.
That's right.
Be curious, and the curiosity. If you stay with curiosity, it will help keep you open. As soon as you stop being curious, I've landed on the solution. I am done. I will think no more. But that's like, and it could be lots and lots of those little things, one after another. But then you have to go back to curiosity. So much to work
What I like
with.
about the comet is the comet feels curious. It's always exploring. A meteorite, those pieces that fall, they land and they destroy when they land. Maybe that's meteorite thinking, and the comet is curious. It's continues its exploration, its orbit, and I think it's a great metaphor for it's orbiting the sun, right? So we're thinking about, okay, what are the main ideas? What is the true sun we want to orbit, or maybe we were orbiting something that we weren't aware of before that we can be more aware of now. And as we break apart, I like your metaphor or your image of reharmonizing, because if the comet is breaking apart, or if ideas are breaking down, right now we're seeing livelihoods, economies, education breaking apart, and trying to reform in various ways. It's a great time to, make those steps for okay, there's been something we've been needing to release for a very long time. And here's our chance to do it. So some parts may break off and not come back, not be part of the reformed NeoWise comet, if you will. So I think that's a really great question to be asking ourselves right now, and could lend itself to a really beautiful visualization. Who wouldn't love to jump on the comet right now and have a trip?
Who doesn't feel like they're on the comet right now?
And in fact, I have to admit, I haven't been able to see the comet with my physical eyes, which I'm sad about. It's very cloudy here in the Bay Area. But, I've been seeing it so clearly in my imagination and in my dreams even, that I feel really with it right now. So you can travel there, whether or not you've got binoculars or the clear skies to see it. It's there, and it's rich with this reflection.
Agreed. I haven't seen it yet either. It was clear last night. I did see a beautiful moon, but we've had a lot of thunderstorms where I am. And that, yeah, I mean, to me, I just want to underscore it. It's an incredibly important time, and the temptation to be like, okay, when we get back to normal, because there's that idea, right? It's very comforting. Let me get back to where I was before. We're never going to go back to where we were there. The before is done, and that's not to say freak out. That's to say that like the opportunities here they're too big for us to just let them go. We're with it no matter what. And to me, the understanding that everybody who's present on the planet right now is really, really important. And that to fall into, go back to sleep, though I just want things the way they were before. Well, imagine what it would be like if it's better. Imagine a better world. And I know we talk about this a lot, and it can seem very, very airy-fairy. And I feel like that at times, like, just let me go back to sleep. Let me go back I want my old life back. Like, I get that. But that is we look at mythology and we look at, these stories, that's not the way forward. It could never be. It never has been. Mm-hmm. It is embracing the difficult, orienting yourself toward the morally beautiful and toward beauty, and developing this new wisdom is the way it has to be. And there are incredible benefits we'll never see until we move through to it, the practices of it. So it's not all bad. It can be incredibly beautiful. Let's be a part of making it thus is what I'm thinking. And taking care of ourselves day to day with compassion. And there's some really, really, really smart people out there, big, heartful people that are on this boat with us in this consciousness of, that the humility and the wisdom together. And so I want to mention that one of our podcast friends, my friend Keoni Hanale from Maui, he finally has a podcast. So I want to point people toward that. If we are developing this new wisdom, we can definitely look at the original wisdoms of original people, of which Keoni comes from. His podcast is called the Pohala Podcast, and that's Pohala podcast. He only has a handful of episodes, but that is some powerful and beautiful stuff. In addition, I always recommend the Living Myth podcast with Michael Mead. I basically kind of want to just take everything he said and put it into our podcast to be like, we're done. Like what he said. It's really, really brilliant.
That's why I listen all the time. I just can't listen to him all the time because I'm like, oh my God. Collective initiation. You're right. Ah!
It is. I know. We could just regurgitate everything that he says, and I learn a ton from it. And they're super short. They're maybe 30 minutes. So highly recommend both the Pohala podcast and the Living Myth podcast with Michael Mead. So there's more until the next episode. 100,005 downloads.
That's right. Well, I'm joining with you in this conversation of NeoWise. We're in different states, different time zones, but we're connected by comets and coronavirus. Here we are, and archetypes.
And love.
And aloha. So thank you so much, Julianne, and I look forward to our next adventure and the next 100,000 downloads.
For sure. Aloha to you and a hui ho until we meet again.
Thanks for listening. We know you could have done something else with the last, 36 minutes of your life, but we're super glad that you spent it with us. Check our show notes for links and resources, and as always, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Tarot Podcast. Or you can email us, tarotpodcast@gmail.com. So easy to remember. And big, huge, ginormous thank you to our patrons, Peter, Katt, Richard, Juniper, and Rash of Stay Woke Tarot. We seriously appreciate your friendship and your support every day. And thanks to our sponsor, Keen, you can get your 5-minute reading for $5 by visiting trykeen.com/archetypal. This podcast is produced by Both And Media, and the theme music is by The Lunar Group. Until next time, aloha.